This episode is brought to you by NordVPN. Now, if I had a dime every time someone asks me if I've started my Christmas shopping yet, everyone would be getting Lamborghinis this year. However, the truth is, I really don't enjoy the pressure of it. And I reckon a lot of you feel the same way. Luckily, NordVPN has our backs. Nord can help you save money by avoiding price discrimination, as well as giving you access to foreign e-stores, apps, and online auctions, meaning you can find products that you usually can't see unless you're using a VPN like Nord's. This is great for me because I have a lot of people in my life who are pretty hard to buy for. So much more choice means greater chances of success. So it might not be a Lamborghini from Katty and me this year, but consider this exclusive NordVPN deal a gift to our loyal Trip US listeners.
Visit nordvpn.com/tripus. That's nordvpn.com/tripus. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee.
The link is in the episode description. Happy holidays.
Welcome to The Rest is Politics US. I'm Katty K with our first episode of 2025.
Well, Happy New Year, Katty K. I'm Anthony Scaramucci. It's nice to be with you again. What are we talking about, Katty K?
Even though it's New Year and you'd think everybody was going quiet, they're clearly not down at Mar A Lago because there's been a little bit of a bust up in MAGA world. So we are going to talk about Elon Musk and his running battle. It's got kind of spicy with Steve Bannon over visas and why it's important and who we think is going to win that battle. And then in the second half of the program, we are going to talk about Jimmy Carter, who, of course, died earlier this week. And we'll look back at his presidency. And I'm particularly interested, Anthony, in your thoughts on his post-presidency and what it tells us about presidencies today. So we're going to take a few minutes to pay tribute to Jimmy Carter. But first of all, I haven't asked you, have you had a good Christmas? Have you had a good New Year? Did you have fun with the family?
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, my head is the size of a jack-o'-lantern from overeating. Okay, it can barely fit in the screen. But I'm doing my best, Katty. I'm trying to sweat it off. It was the brutal amount of legendary eating. Let's just put it that way. What do you want to talk about, girl?
You and I are at least are being nicer to each other than Elon Musk and Steve Bannon. Not a bad segue there. Who have had a little bit, I don't think their language has been what you could call in the spirit of the season.
Yeah, listen, I was on the 23rd of December, I was on CNN. Wolf Blitzer asked me a question about this, and I said that, listen, I this is born from my life experience. Elon, back up off the politics. You don't need to be that aggressive with the politics. You got an amazing life, made $400 billion, back off the politics. I said, they're going to hurt you. I didn't mean they were going to physically hurt you. These are very malicious, very malevolent people, and they'll start doing things to you and your business and your personal life that are just not fun, including, and, I've had this experience, Katty. They'll put him on the front page of tabloids and they'll light him up. Now, maybe he wants that. He doesn't care. But my thing about Steve Bannon, I have met a lot of bad people in my life, but I have never met anybody like Steve Bannon because Steve Bannon has got, and again, we've talked about this. Thank God he's so ugly, but he's the triple threat. Okay. Let me explain that. Okay. He's well-read. He's incredibly malevolent. And then he has that dark attention-seeking madness. Okay. So we're now in the dark attention-seeking madness phase. He's come out of jail. His podcast is doing okay, but he's nowhere in MAGA world. He's nowhere. And so now he's trying to make a flank move. He's trying to assess if he is the heartbeat of MAGA, if he's the core of MAGA. And he's going after Musk in a way that's not endearing him to Trump and is not endearing him to the people in the inner circle. And so this is a fascinating thing that's going on. There's a civil war taking place. Musk is winning that war right now. He's been located at Mar A Lago, $2,000 a night at a cottage right outside the mansion.
Apparently asking for food out of hours. He's kind of demanding, but
and he's got his son X on his shoulders, and he's got his mom with him, and he's winning that war. for now. But I've seen this thing play out. And I guess what I would say to you, because you've been around politics a long time, if 40 of us went into the administration, had very bad experiences with Donald Trump, so bad that we went out and publicly spoke about the danger of Donald Trump. And I'm on Wall Street, and we say on Wall Street, past performance is not an indication of future results. Okay, we have to say that as a disclaimer. But in politics, Katty, is past performance an indication of future results, or is this the new and improved Donald Trump with a new and improved team, and they're just going to govern brilliantly with no skirmishes?
You know, I spent 4 years covering Donald Trump and was exhausted by the end of it because of the sheer chaos of how, it's government by chaos. That is his theory of government. And part of that is ideological, that you want to do that because you want to throw everything up in the air and you don't believe that the way things have been done were productive, whether that's ideologically productive or practically productive or economically productive. And so you want to destroy things. That's the whole point of sort of populism, is to try and destroy things. And it doesn't look to me, and we haven't even got to the administration yet, but it doesn't look to me like the next 4 years are going to be any calmer. We should fill people in on what this kind of row is about within MAGA at the moment. And it's all over the issue of immigrants and visas, and whether people who are high-skilled workers from around the world should get what are called H-1B visas. And these are visas that particularly go to people with master's degrees. Many of them go to people who are very educated from India, from China, from Europe, but predominantly from countries with high numbers of engineers, of software coders, and they go and work in Silicon Valley and some in other areas too. But Silicon Valley has really exploded the number of H-1B visas. Tesla alone is now number 16 in 2024 of amongst the companies that brought people in on these H-1B visas. Tesla brought in 742 H-1B visa recipients, and the row has broken out between the Steve Bannon kind of purist, more nativist, these jobs should go to Americans, and Silicon Valley shouldn't be being given a free pass in allowing foreign workers to come in and take away American jobs. And so you've had people like Laura Loomer, who is this right-wing influencer, Laura Ingraham, who is a Fox News personality host, even Nikki Haley weighing in actually on the side of Steve Bannon, saying, hold on a second, these tech bros shouldn't just be allowed to open America's doors to foreign workers. They should make more effort to train and employ and skill up American workers. And this is a kind of, and you're seeing this sort of, you're seeing the kind of pure sort of populist nativist element of MAGA up against the high-tech, high-earning, let's focus on economic results and profits world of Silicon Valley. And it's exploded into this kind of ugly war with, this is a family show, so perhaps we shouldn't be using these words, but Elon Musk saying that you could go fuck yourself in the face to Steve Bannon and the MAGA crowd who don't want these foreign workers to come in. And Steve Bannon replying by saying, we're going to rip your face off, and that you should sit back and study Elon Musk. You can't just arrive at the party and suddenly say you know how to govern. What is it with faces? Why do they keep going after each other's faces like this? That was kind of weird to me.
Well, it's a reference to Tropic Thunder. The Tropic Thunder is a movie we're not allowed to see anymore because you've got Robert Downey Jr. in blackface. But in the movie, they use that expression, "Go blank yourself in the face." But there's something about this that I want to give some footnotes to, and that is Republican history. Mm-hmm. Republicans made a decision about 20 years ago that the H-1B visa was an important part of the American body politic. And this goes to what Lee Kuan Yew once said about America. So the founder of Singapore was interviewed in his late 80s by Graham Allison, the dean of the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. And Graham Allison said to Lee Kuan Yew, was probably one of the most brilliant leaders of his time. And he turned that little island off the coast of Malaysia into on a per capita basis, one of the most successful economic engines in world history. And Henry Kissinger once said about Lee Kuan Yew, if he had only had a bigger country, a bigger nation, so many good things could have happened. But what he said about America is that America is an idea. It's a culture. It's not based on a bloodline, and a result of which you can get to America and you can assimilate in America. You can be British American or Italian American or German American, and you can do it quite quickly. I think he used 5 years.
Which Steve Bannon and co. don't like the idea of, by the way.
They hate it. But this is something that's happened in America. And by the way, there's been Americans that have hated that from day one. I guess, once they killed off all the Native Americans, they said, okay, we got here first.
The actual Americans.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you actually didn't get here first. And then when waves came over, they said, well, you don't belong here. That's called American nativism. It's a form of racism. They did that to my grandparents. They told them to go back to Italy, etc.
They did it to the Irish. They did it to the Jews. They did it to the
Irish,
Germans, to the Mexicans.
They do it to everybody. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not saying they just did it to the Italians. They do it to everybody, but it's very important. So what Lee Kuan Yew says to Graham Allison becomes the platform for the Republican Party for several decades, which is that this is a tractor beam, this country, for the great intellectual capital of the world. It can arrive here, it can assimilate, it becomes American, these people, and they go on to do great things, and it's a font of innovation. The reason why Elon Musk is so hot about it is that he believed that, and so he showed up
here.
He
was the recipient of an H-1B visa.
Yeah, and he naturalizes. He goes on to great success here. Sergey Brin, I could name hundreds of very successful people. There's a gentleman by the name of Sriram Krishnan, who is the one that they start this controversy over. And it's interesting because he's a brilliant guy. He worked at A16Z. He lives in London. He's a personal friend of mine. Every time I'm in London, I spend time with him. And he's just a brilliant, gentle person, a real gentleman. And he's going to go into the administration, and he's going to work on the AI projects with David Sachs. And people are upset about it because he's not purely American. He's been naturalized into America from India.
So that's a question for you, Anthony. Are they upset about Sriram Krishnan because he's not American, or are they set because he is in favor of allowing more non-American high-skilled workers to come into America and drive economic progress in the country? I mean, is it just because he's not American? If he was, I don't know, who's popular in America and who do the MAGA people like? I was going to say if he's Canadian, but I don't think that's appropriate. If he was Danish and coming in to the administration, would there have been this backlash against him?
I would say no, probably wouldn't be.
I kind of agree.
This is the gist of the whole thing. They're going to fight over this, and they're going to say that, we're going to close the border. We don't need Albert Einstein anymore. We'll do without Albert Einstein. Americans need these jobs, and Americans need to be propped up, and we don't need to draw from the rest of the world. We're America. This sort of American egotism, this American centrism, if you will. And it's a very big danger. Mitt Romney, when I worked in that campaign in 2012, he was an H-1B visa guy, and he said, when you graduate from a school here, Stanford, Harvard, wherever it is, we want to staple a green card to your diploma. That was the actual words. And Trump actually used those words on the All In podcast a few months ago, the Mitt Romney words. And I worked with Donald Trump on Mitt Romney's campaign. We did 2 fundraisers in Trump's Trump Tower triplex apartment. And the reason why this is so interesting is that Trump has actually, the brilliance of Donald Trump, I've said this repeatedly, talks out of both sides of his mouth. I hate H-1B visas. America, America, America. And then he's out with the tech bros. I love H-1B visas. Let's staple a green card to everybody. And
he probably doesn't have an ideological position on this.
No, he doesn't care.
He'll go with whatever he thinks serves his own interests better. When he's with the tech bros, he needs their money. He wants them to help him get reelected. Fine with the H-1B visas. If he's in the MAGA crowd and he needs the MAGA voters, I hate the H-1B visas.
I'm a little bit of an idealist. I thought the American presidency, you have to deal with the real world the way it is, but there's a little bit of a normative quality to the American presidency. Reagan understood that, where you're searching for the ideals and you're trying to push the country towards those ideals. So let me ask you this question. If you were in the seat of this controversy, and forget about the politics of it, Katty, what's best for America?
I think it's indisputable that America's success, not just historically, but even since COVID, has been driven by its more open door policy towards immigration. The American Enterprise Institute, which is this conservative think tank, libertarian, pro-business think tank in the US, has done a study that showed that for every H-1B visa holder who's allowed into the US, that creates 1.83 jobs for Americans. So almost 2 jobs, right? So you bring in an H-1B visa holder from India, from China, from Ukraine, from Mexico, a high-skilled performer who helps grow American companies, that provides more jobs for American companies. But I can see, and I think we've all learned during the course of the 2024 election, that however much economists produce the data showing that migrants into the US drive economic performance and drive growth and drive wealth and prosperity in this country, even if those migrants are not coming into America legally, and we're talking about the high-tech, high-skilled workers, even the non-high-tech, non-high-skilled workers are driving economic growth in America that is the envy of most European economies. You still have to deal with the fact that that produces a backlash. And I think that's what's fascinating about what we're seeing play out in MAGA world this week, where you've got, the Steve Bannons now calling for 100% moratorium on all immigration until we get this thing sorted. I mean, he's basically saying no more migrants into the US. But is that just cutting off your nose to spite your face? I mean, I get that I mean, his argument would be that by allowing in foreign workers, it's a kind of lazy route to economic success for these tech companies, and what they really should do is invest in the American worker, and that this gives them a cop-out in a sense. They can just bring in somebody who can't then go and leave Amazon or leave Tesla to go and work for another company. They're kind of tied to that company, and you get an American worker who has more rights, more freedom to move around, but you've got to invest in those American workers, and that these kind of high-tech, high-profit companies are doing the kind of thing that is not good for America in the long run. I mean, I always worry about people being nativist, and I particularly in a country like America, which is so founded on the ideals and the benefits of immigration. It seems to me like a nativist streak is not going to help the country in the long run.
Okay, well, you side with Elon Musk, sounds like.
So not on everything. I am worried about how Elon Musk is weighing into lots of countries' politics, and I do worry about having unelected billionaires with the amount of power he has. But on this issue, it seems to me that the data in favor of immigration for the American economy, and therefore actually for Americans, is pretty incontrovertible.
Yeah, so I would just say to everybody listening, if you're American and your family is from an immigration story, which it would obviously have to be, unless you're
all Americans, apart from
unless you're a Native American, I don't understand how you could side against this.
Let me try you on the counter argument, which is: are these tech companies benefiting and not really giving back to America because they aren't investing in it's giving them a kind of loophole, and they're avoiding the responsibility of investing. And we know that the American education system is not performing well compared to other education systems around the world on many metrics. Does this allow them to sort of duck their responsibility to the American education system and American workers?
Yeah, you see, that would have been the better argument for Bannon. If Bannon had said, listen, I get the H-1B visas for the Einsteins of the world, but what these companies are actually doing is they're using a loophole, and they're bringing in software engineers that are not the Albert Einsteins, and they're bringing in other waves of people where, in fact, we do have people in the United States that could do those jobs, and we would want these companies to be more focused on that, and maybe we could snipe up and make it sharper, the H-1B visa thing.
You mean as opposed to saying, if you're going to do that, we're going to rip your face off? That's not like the most sophisticated argument he could have come up with.
But we're in the attention economy now, right? So those are how we get each other's attention.
Such a good
we're going to blank each other in the face and do this stuff. But here are three things I would say.
Grow up.
Not this group of people, Katty. No. This is going to get worse before it gets better. But here are three things I would say about this. Number one, is there a civil war? Like I say, the answer is there is, but looks like Bannon is losing that war. I think the big issue for the MAGA people are the tech bros MAGA. Well, let me give you a news flash, Katty K. They are not MAGA. They are for their specific personal wealth and personal interests. Is Donald Trump MAGA, Katty K?
Well, that's the good question.
Is he?
Well, he was certainly MAGA in 2016 because he needed MAGA. Now he doesn't have to run for office again. Who does he want to hang out with? I suspect he is more inclined to the tech bros and the billionaires.
Okay, so Donald Trump, let me give you a news flash, all you MAGA people. Not saying that there's like even one MAGA person listening to us, but if there was one MAGA person listening to us, I would say, hey, my brother, Donald Trump is not MAGA. He's not MAGA. He's
a
not
wet
MAGA.
towel for your forehead.
He's a transactionalist. He could care less about you. If this is good for him, he wants to cut some deals for his family in the Middle East. He wants to do some transactions. He knows Musk is helpful to him with the social media business, and he's not MAGA. Okay, so let's just put that out there. And then the second question is, will these civil wars continue? And I think the answer is yes, but we're leaving out Susie Wiles because she made an announcement this week, which I thought was fascinating and very interesting. She said, listen, you're coming into this administration, your social media account is going dark. Okay, now that means any cabinet person, anybody trying to get an appointment in the administration, go dark on your social media. But here's the beauty of this. Elon Musk's not going in that administration, Katty K. He's not even, this department is a non-department. It should be called Doge. N standing for not Department of Government Efficiency, because there's no department, right? So that point is there's going to be skirmishes, but it's going to be less than people think, because there's going to be some muting going on inside there that people should recognize. And then quickly, my last point is that what will happen to Steve Bannon? And I believe Steve Bannon gets pushed harder to the fringe because I know from personal experience, Trump does not like Steve Bannon anymore. Stopped liking him in July of 2017.
But he does like Laura Loomer. I mean, there are people around Steve Bannon, and he likes Laura Ingraham when she's on his side. I mean, there are people in that world that he still wants to curry favor with, it seems.
He
Otherwise,
does.
She wouldn't have been flying around the country on the campaign plane with him.
But that's Trump. He's got two people inside one body. And so he wants that out there. He wants the controversy.
What's the star sign that you always refer to?
No, he's a Gemini. He's a perfect Gemini. But the problem with Trump, it's like they're like evil twins, Katty K. I mean, usually there's like one good one in there, but he's got like two bad ones, right? So Laura Loomer, these people, he'll throw them chum. He'll throw them butane to light the fires. But he's not MAGA. And that is the weirdest thing about Donald Trump. He would much rather, and by the way, Howard Stern, the shock jock DJ, Trump had been on his show, I don't know, hundreds of times, said something brilliant about Trump. He says, guys, you're supporting him. He doesn't like you. You're not going to be at his table for New Year's Eve. Okay. He doesn't like you. Okay. Also, he doesn't want to shake your hand because he's a germaphobe. You like him and you think he's your savior, but he does not like you. Just give you the news flash on that because we know him from New York and we know who he likes. Okay. You know, I love the fact that you curse on this, but I'm going to use a curse word here because it's very appropriate. Okay?
I really don't like cursing very much, but I was repeating what they were saying.
Fired in another curse, Sandra D. You fired in another curse.
Counting.
But he is a star effer. Okay. And for those of you outside the United States, what is that? I want to be around stars and I want to name drop that I was. Oh, did you know I just did a podcast with Katty K? Because I am a little bit of a star name dropper. I drop your name all the time, Katty, in case you didn't know. I drop it all the time. And
that's
Trump
very sweet of you.
Wants to do that. He gets on the phone with people. This is why he left the documents in the bathroom. He gets on the phone with people. Can you believe I just talked to so-and-so and I had this guy at my wedding and blah-de-blah, blah-de-blah. MAGA people, you're not on Trump's list. Okay, just got to give you the news flash. But this infighting is going to be different this time. There's no re-election. There's a clock ticking. It's 4 years and done. Trump's going from 78 to 82. Going to be infighting because he can't help it. It's just going to be very different.
One other thing I would say, though, I think that's been interesting about this week, and being out of the country, you hear a lot about it, is the degree to which people are watching Elon Musk with trepidation. Because I think you're right, there's going to be infighting and it'll be different from the first time around. But a lot of people, and I know this from conversations I've had with European diplomats in the last week or two, are watching how is Elon Musk going to use his power and his proximity to Trump to meddle in other countries' politics. We've already seen him describing Reform, Nigel Farage's party in the UK, as the only hope for British politics. We've seen him really weigh in on German politics. He wrote an op-ed in the Welt newspaper, and he said that the far-right party, the Alternative für Deutschland, which has been kind of compared to having fascist roots in Germany and fascist ideology in Germany, that is the only hope again for saving Germany. This has caused an enormous amount. We saw him weigh in. You and I spoke about this on Canadian politics, but the way he's done it in Germany this week, the AfD is really seen as on the far right wing of European politics, and that this causes consternation and his relationship with Donald Trump. So how this all pans out, if Elon Musk were to be cut off by Donald Trump and Trump, were to disown him and have a major falling out with him, that would be less worrying to European leaders. But I know that European diplomats are thinking, okay, we might have to deal with tariffs under Donald Trump, but what do we do about Elon Musk? How do we manage Elon Musk, who at the moment has this good relationship with Donald Trump, but how do we manage his interfering in our domestic politics in a way that they see as super unhelpful and potentially worrying? And the fact that he is going for these parties that are on the kind of extremes of European politics is something that they're watching closely. And honestly, I've been told it's one of the things that is preoccupying them the most about Trump 2.0.
Again, these are great questions. We'll have to see what happens, but we do know something about Elon. He's not this free speech absolutist, because when they were coming for him on his own feed, no bueno, he didn't like it. And he was polling people, he was suspending people's accounts. And so if you're a politician in Europe and this is a microphone, it seems to be like a little bit of an alt-right microphone right now, more so than anything else. It'll be interesting to see what Linda does there. Linda, of course, being the CEO of, I know Linda from NBC and not well, but it'll be interesting to see what she does, because she was trying to bring in people like Don Lemon from the left. Of course, Elon fired him after the first interview. And so it's an alt-right platform. And so you don't want to get in the gnashing with Elon Musk. That would be my recommendation to a European politician. Beat him on the battlefield. Don't beat him in social media. And when he walks around on the halls of Congress with X on his shoulders, they're going to be extraordinarily nice to him, because the Doge thing polls well with the American people. Now, nothing will happen, and it'll be this ineffectual program.
But his relationship with Trump gives him certainly at the moment gives him power.
No question.
At home
so you're
and abroad.
You're stuck there. Don't go after Elon Musk. It'd be my recommendation. It's not going to help you. Merry Christmas, everyone. Are you bored of getting your friends and family the same old Christmas gifts every year? Look no further, okay? Because we have the ultimate Christmas gift for you, and that is a subscription to the Rest is Politics US. To become a founding member alongside of the two of us. Who's a founding member, Katty K? That would be me. I paid the money. I know you're probably surprised by that, but I decided, you know what? Let me see what these people are getting. I filled it out on my Apple Pay.
You were not Scrooge. You were...
No. You see that? I'm paying us to be us with our fellow founding members, and you can do the same thing, guys. I even bought one for my wife, by the way, and she does love being a founding member because she likes Katty K, okay? And she's sort of bored with me, but she enjoys listening to Katty K beat up on me. And you can too. You can get your friends to do that as well. Go out and get your friends the ultimate Christmas gift. Founding membership in the Rest is Politics US.
Well, this is my official apology to your poor wife. And I do hope that you bought Deirdre something else for Christmas as well as a subscription to the Rest is Politics US. But I'm sure she got something sparkly too. It is the perfect gift, however, for all of those political nerds in your life. It'll mean that they can listen to the show without ads, always nice. They get access to our exclusive bonus episodes every week and early access to all of the episodes of our mini-series. And we've got a new one coming up. So just in time for Christmas, you can buy them a founding members membership, and they will get access to our new January the 6th series as well.
Or why not ask for it for yourself? I mean, if someone says to you, hey, Dad or Mom, what should I get you for Christmas? You should say a founding membership in the Rest is Politics US. Thank you guys so much. Go to the restispoliticsus.com and look for gifts.
This week, we have been thinking about President Jimmy Carter, who died after
22 months, Katty. So
22 months.
He was sent to hospice. They said he had one.
This
is one of the toughest. This is one of the toughest people that we have had in our history. And obviously, he is the only president of the 45 presidents thus far. I mean, Donald Trump, being such an evil bastard, he may live to be 250 years old, Donald Trump. That's a prediction by me on our podcast. But he's the first president to get to 100. And he was told when he entered hospice that he would have a month or two in hospice. He lasted 22 months.
Yes, I feel like I have prepared Jimmy Carter's obits too many times. And every time I've done it, I've actually felt come away sort of heartened, because he does in so many ways, and we can talk about his president's legacy, but just to talk about him as a human being, I've always found his humility. Yes, he was stubborn as a Georgia mule, they used to say when he was in government, and that may have been part of his problems as a president. But after his post-presidency, he has done something that other recent presidents haven't done. He hasn't gone away and made a lot of money on the speaking tour, or from having entertainment businesses, or hobnobbing with global leaders. He's
not selling Bibles with his name on it, Katty? I didn't see that.
Okay, selling Bibles or sneakers or anything else with his name on it. He went back to his home in the Plains, Georgia. And at one point, the value of his home after his presidency was less than the value of the Secret Service cars parked outside of his home, giving him protection. And I think that says an awful lot about who Jimmy Carter was as a person, his commitment to trying to use his post-presidency really to work on initiatives around peace, around poverty, the fact that he's carried on teaching Sunday school at his local Sunday school. I know that one should perhaps measure a president, and maybe this is why Jimmy Carter is interesting, to measure a president by what they achieved during their presidency. But for me, it's the legacy of Jimmy Carter, the person, and his commitment to faith and values that represents in many ways the best things about America. I mean, it's almost like a modesty and frugality, and not trying to be. I mean, he's the antithesis of everything that you have seen in Mar A Lago over the last couple of weeks. And in a way, that is Jimmy Carter.
You know, it's interesting because everyone is waxing beautifully about Jimmy Carter. There's a few people on the right that are negative, and they're explaining to you some of the things that he did that were negative. And I was a young man.
Talk about those a little bit. What is it that people on the right don't like about him?
Middle school when Carter was president, and my dad, who was in a union, hated Jimmy Carter. And my dad was actually a Republican because the Republicans controlled the union in the area that I lived in, Nassau County. And so he hated him because he blamed him for the inflation, sort of the Joe Biden thing. We had rampant inflation in the 70s. But the irony of that is the inflation started primarily because Richard Nixon unclipped the US dollar from the gold standard. And so that was going to cause inflation one way or another. And Carter was standing there on watch when the inflation really started to wave into the US. But here are three things for the president, I would say. And I'm going to say three things that he really hurt the world, Jimmy Carter. People are not going to like me saying this because he's been sainted in many quarters, and he's going to have a state funeral. And he deserves a state funeral on January 9th. But the three things that Carter did well was he was a healing sort of a guy. He was bringing us out of Watergate. He didn't go after Jerry Ford for the pardon of Richard Nixon. I mean, slight rhetoric there, but not major. And he was trying to heal the country. That's number one. I think it's important to point that out.
One thing quickly, I would add in Vietnam, the 1960s, the civil rights era.
Yes.
I mean, America has been through an awful lot of tumult.
Well, let's take it back to the Kennedy assassination. So
yes,
we had soaring idealism in the beginning of the 60s. The assassination left people with a lot of cynicism. the war. We got quagmired into that war. And then, of course, we had Watergate. And so Carter was trying to pull us out of that. And I think in general, people felt that about him. And so I give him positive marks on that. Number two, believe it or not, he was raising the defense budget. Well, when he left, if you go to the Carter Library, which I have been to, one of the hallmarks that they try to promote in the library is that he put a 5% increase in the defense budget at a time when America was still fiscally minded and they were really trying to manage budget deficits. And Reagan unleashed the real big deficit spending, but Carter was at least seeing the world towards the end of his presidency the way it actually was, not the way he wanted it to be. And then the third thing was he ushered in the Middle East peace deal between the Egyptians and the Israelis, which helped the Middle East in some ways, and it did add to the security apparatus for Israel,
and which took that stubbornness of character we were talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So those are the three things on the positive side. On the negative side, however, is that he was not a realist. And when you're not a realist in a job like that, he didn't read Siddhartha. Hermann Hesse writes about karma in Siddhartha, and in the book Damien, this is a great famous German writer, Hermann Hesse. He writes in Damien about the abraxas in our personalities. We have good and evil in our personalities. If you're going to be the American president, you have to understand that. You have to understand the complexity of that. It's just not all white or all black. There's grays out there, and you have to shoot through the grays to get to the best of what you can get to for the world and for people. And Carter didn't get that at all. And so he's very righteous. He pulled the Americans out of the Olympics in 1980 as a result of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Think of the hypocrisy. We're going into Vietnam for our political reasons. Okay, they're going into Afghanistan for their political reasons. He boycotts. This sends morale in the United States spiraling. Second thing he does is he gives a speech with a sweater on, and he says that America has entered a malaise. You can't do that as president. You can't go to your people and say, oh, by the way, you guys suck, and here's the reason why you suck. You can't do that. Okay, that sweater speech, that very famous speech, killed him from a tempo in the U.S.
And he gave that after having spent 10 days up at Camp David, kind of in retreat with a stream of visitors coming in to see him. And that was what he came up with.
Yeah, that's too much of a moralism, frankly, and that hurt him. And then the third thing he did was he botched the Middle East. He had Kissinger come to see him and say, hey, I know we're supposed to support the Shah, and we put the Shah up, and people will remember this. And we have a great sister or brother podcast called The Rest is Classified, where they can talk to you about what the CIA and MI6 did in Iran in the early 1950s when we took out Mossadegh and we installed the Shah. And so we had a close relationship with the Shah. He was a repressive person to his citizens. And Kissinger said, don't bring him into the country. We have to figure out a way to negotiate with these clerics in Iran. If you bring them into the country, we're going to have holy hell in the Middle East. 44 years later, we do have a big national security, Israeli security problem in the Middle East. So these are things from his righteousness. He mishandled these things, and these are legacies, Katty, that we're still dealing with. Okay, so having said all of that, I'll just finish on this one point. He had a deal going to get the hostages back. And had he gotten them back, he probably would have won the presidency.
You think he would have run, even though his approval ratings were so low because of the inflation and the malaise issue?
Well, I think it would have helped his approval ratings. It was a very slow,
right.
Up until the end.
It would have been a big triumphant moment close to the election.
Yes, and it broke for Reagan at the end because it appeared that the hostage situation was hopeless. But we now know that the Reagan guys, in violation of the Hatch Act, were negotiating with the Iranians, and they basically said you're going to get a better.
They were out there in the Middle East meeting through
you're going to get
parties.
a better deal from us if we win than Jimmy Carter. And of course, they let the hostages go on the 20th of January, right as Reagan was being inaugurated. And listen, that's the ugly side of politics. That's the real side of politics. There were too many blind spots in Jimmy Carter's personality. And the other thing he did as a post-president is, he was quite harsh on Israel. He was quite harsh on certain things going around the world. And he was very good on ringworm. He was very good on trying to sanctify democratic elections around the world. But it's like with everybody, Katty. Okay, like with everybody, it's a mixed bag.
I mean, he wrote a book basically accusing the Israelis of apartheid, which is a position that is sort of anathema and has been in American foreign policy, but actually in European foreign policy, there are many voices who would say that the Israeli government had treated the Palestinians in a way that was the segregation of Palestinians and the putting down of Palestinians, that was not an unfair criticism. So, and that I think the criticism of Jimmy Carter is getting some revision in the light of the war in Gaza and the treatment of people in Gaza. But he stuck his neck out in a way that made very many people uncomfortable, and he was accused of anti-Semitism by some American Jews and by some Israelis, and so he didn't make himself popular in Israel. I think the other thing that, and we should explain why the sweater speech was so damaging to him. Jimmy Carter came in after Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, and he was the simple peanut farmer. He had literally grown up in a house where there was not access to kind of social services or electricity, or he'd grown up a poor kid in Georgia, and he came from a Southern Baptist background, and he wanted to strip away the kind of what he saw as the rather imperial trappings of the Oval Office. He wanted to make the Oval Office much more accessible, low-key, less grand, less pomp and circumstance. He invited members of Congress over to breakfast famously and didn't give them the kind of full White House fry-up, gave them a couple of pieces of toast and a pastry. And that didn't go down well with the politicians he was trying to negotiate with. And the sweater speech was, again, it was part, I mean, we can talk about the content of that speech in a second, but putting on a sweater was his way of saying, I am no grander than the American people. I am one of you, a small d Democrat, making the White House more accessible, more the people, genuinely the people's house. But actually, American voters kind of like having a president who is up on a pedestal and has a bit of grandeur and has some of the pomp and circumstance. And they respect some of that, I think. They do want their commander-in-chief to be this rather grand figure. I mean, they are not electing a prime minister in that respect. I've spoken about this before, how, a British prime minister walks into a room and the press corps doesn't stand up. Jimmy Carter walked into a room as president and everybody stood up, and he didn't like it. He banned the playing of Call to the Chief when he was president. And I think doing away with some of those trappings actually hurt him with American voters. They wanted something they could look up to. And I think the other thing that hurt him is that he didn't understand, in calling on Americans in the middle of the oil crisis of the 1970s, to sacrifice, to turn down their heating, to drive less often, to carpool when they could. He misread the American public. And I don't know if this is something specifically about America, but it did make me think of Europe today, where you and I have spoken about this around climate change. There's a lot of flight shaming in Europe. It's not people will call you out for taking a plane instead of taking a train, or for traveling at all, because you shouldn't be using up fossil fuels when the planet is burning. You don't get any of that in America. Americans, I think, inherently, they like to think that there is a solution that is technological. We'll work hard, we'll find the solution, but don't tell us to sacrifice in that way. Don't tell us to turn down our air conditioning or our heating. And I think Jimmy Carter, in a weird way, coming from Georgia, may have actually been a little bit more of a European, had a bit more of a kind of Scandinavian sensitivity to that. But he misread his public. He asked Americans to be something they're not.
There's a journalist by the name of Chuck Thompson. He wrote in the Columbia Insight. I lifted this for our podcast. So a shout out to Chuck Thompson. He said that Jimmy Carter misunderstood that the Americans feel that they have a providential right to urban pickup trucks. And I think that sums it all up, Katty.
Yeah.
Okay, just what you just said about, Europe versus America. Give me the gas guzzling pickup truck and stop your nonsense. And when Reagan got into power, he understood this. And what did Reagan do? He ripped the solar panels off the roof of the White House. He said, this is nonsense. And he ripped them off. And most people cheered that, Katty. So listen, America, obviously different place than the rest of the world. We're still using the imperial unit system of measurement here.
I mean, right or wrong, you have to understand your public.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he missed that. But listen, praise to him for his public service, praise to him for his selflessness in so many different ways. But what we know about our lives, and it's just a fortunate truth about us as human beings, you need tough people in that job, but tough people that are also flexible in terms of what they see as right and wrong in our world, Katty. And it's a hard thing to ask people because we're trying to do the right. He was trying to do the right thing.
He was trying,
as a result of which he got a lot of things wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting the degree to which America. You look at what happened with Jimmy Carter. He was a reaction against Richard Nixon, really. And then you get Ronald Reagan, a reaction against Jimmy Carter. And you see this pattern happening so often in America in modern history, where you get somebody in who is a reaction against somebody else. George W. Bush comes in promising to restore dignity to the Oval Office. Barack Obama comes in after George W. Bush, promising to make America purple and heal some of the divisions. He fails to do that, but that's what he does. We have said this before. Donald Trump is elected in part in reaction to the fact that Barack Hussein Obama was elected. Obama would hate to hear that said, but that was the pushback from some of the MAGA people. Joe Biden is elected in reaction to the chaos of Donald Trump's handling of the COVID period. Donald Trump is reelected in reaction to the Bidenomics and inflation. It may be fair or it may be unfair, but time and again, you see politicians, you see presidents being elected because of who was elected before them or because of the presidency that happened before them. One question for you. When Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter in 1980, to some extent, it was the kind of battle of hope and optimism against malaise and tighten your belts of Jimmy Carter. And it set up, I think, an idea in American politics that you won elections by being the candidate of optimism. That's how Ronald Reagan had beaten Jimmy Carter in 1980. And for me, that lasted 36 years. Until Donald Trump was inaugurated in 2016 and talked about a period of American carnage. And Donald Trump is not the candidate of hope and optimism. So I have a question for you, which is, do you think that period, that 36-year period where it was the optimist who was elected, is now being ended by Donald Trump? And are we in for a period where you get elected by playing on fear and anger?
So I'm going to take the other side of this for a second. I actually think to Donald Trump's supporters, he is that. I know he's not that to me, and he certainly probably isn't that to you based on what you just said, but he is that to them. They see America as broken. They see America as a laughingstock. They see America with a porous border. They see all of this forever wars, and they see Trump coming in, calling all of that out, and he's going to come now and fix
and make
that.
America great again.
Yeah, make America great again. So it's a weird thing.
But he does it in a very different way from Ronald Reagan did, right? Ronald Reagan talked about the hope of America, the optimism of America, the shining city on the hill. That is not the language of Donald Trump.
It was very hard. When Reagan got shot, he was meeting with a group of union officials. When he came out of the hotel and he got shot under his armpit and the bullet lodged in his lung and it missed his heart by about an inch and he almost died. What they said about Reagan at that moment was very interesting. It was March 30th, 1981. And they said, oh, wow, he was out there talking to the union officials. He was trying to get the country together. So there was an optimism plus unity. What Trump is, you're my people. The other people are not my people. It's us versus them. And if you're with me, be optimistic for you and me, not them. You see, that's the danger. And I think that's what you're sensing in Donald Trump. And that's something that Reagan didn't have. And Carter was a little bit too realistic. Carter was a little bit too detail oriented. As we both know, he famously used to keep track of who was playing tennis on the White House tennis court. He just had the wrong skill set for that job. Good person, did a lot of good things, but had the wrong skill set for that job. And we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. The Iranian situation could have been a different situation. And by the way, the Cuban situation, I mean, I know this is not the rest is history, but let's just talk about this for a second. Eisenhower's decisions during the revolution, which were fortified by Kennedy, sent the trajectory of U.S.-Cuban relations into a 65-ish year spiral. And that island is suffering right now. I mean, they barely have electricity on that island. And I know we can debate whether it's in our interest or not in our interest at this point in our history, not to figure out a way to help those people. But that started in the Eisenhower administration. And this situation with the Iranians started in the Carter administration. So these presidents, when they make decisions, they have consequence, Katty. And they have consequence that could last multiple decades.
One other question, then we're going to wrap this up because we've gone on a little long and everybody's a little, tired from their New Year's celebrations. We don't want to keep you too long. I'm certainly a little tired from my nights of revelry here in Morocco with my sister and my family. But did Joe Biden fall into the Jimmy Carter trap? In the sense that every president never wanted to be Jimmy Carter again. Maybe they like his post-presidency, but they didn't want to replicate what he did. He did it slightly differently, but did Joe Biden, in a period of inflation, sort of not blame the American people and tell them to turn down their heating or turn down their air conditioning, but try to tell them, actually, it's not what you think it is, that actually it's getting better. Inflation is coming down. Unemployment is coming down. I mean, it wasn't the same message, but it was similar in tone of not really empathizing with the problem that they were going through, but trying to kind of tell them to buck up, as my mother would have said.
I mean, I think there's some relevancy and truth to that, but
I'm not saying either of them could have done more about the inflation. Inflation is notoriously difficult for any president to handle, but I just wonder whether we will.
I just think that job has a lot of imagery to it as well, and the president, from an image perspective, over the last 4 years, didn't do himself any good. As we pointed out, he broke his foot. He didn't wear the boot afterwards. Now he's got that stultering walk. He has lost a step in terms of his cognition. And by the way, since we're talking after New Year's Day and there were terror attacks in the United States,
yes,
he came to the podium, and I thought he looked 100 at the podium. And I don't think he looks like the American people don't feel that he has a command anymore. And it could be, you say, well, that's because he's a lame duck, but it could also be his appearance, Katty. And that's a terrible thing for me to say, but I'm just pointing it out. And so Reagan understood this. Trump understands this. Obama understood it for sure. Okay.
Yes.
There's a media presentation aspect to these jobs, and people see you and they want to see vigor. They want to see strength. The question really is, and this goes to your point, is Trump an idealist? Okay, because what you got with Reagan was the hope, aspiration, optimism, and the idealism. And I don't think any of us see Trump as an idealist, and maybe he does, but I can't literally look to anything in his record that points to that idealism. But anyway, before we go, if you don't mind, I know you've been partying. You don't look hungover, by the way. You look great. I've been home, by the way. I'm doing nothing, but very boring life, very boring. But I want to give us a plug, if you don't mind. I want to talk a little bit about January 6th, which is my birthday. I'll be 61 this year on the 6th of January.
Have you ever told us that? Have you ever told us that January 6th is your
at least
birthday?
Twice a podcast I mentioned
Okay.
it. Unbelievable that on my birthday we had a insurrection. And you and I have put together this, in my mind, a brilliant 4-part miniseries on this, the aftermath of the 2020 election and the insurrection that took place. And tell us a little bit about that before we let these people leave.
Yeah, we're very pleased with this. We worked hard on it along with our producers at Goalhanger, who have done an amazing job pulling what is quite a complex an extraordinary narrative of that day into this miniseries. It's called Storming the Capitol. We're going to look at the whole story, starting off with the 2020 election itself, Joe Biden's victory through Donald Trump's attempts to undermine that victory, right up to the day of January the 6th and those horrifying scenes that we watched in real time. If you can't wait to hear all of the episodes of our series, sign up to become a founding member over at therestispoliticsus.com. And then you can get all 4 episodes straight away on Monday, the 6th of January, as well as ad-free listening and access, of course, to our exclusive members-only Q&A out every Sunday. So that's the January the 6th mini-series, and it begins, of course, on January the 6th, which, for those of you who didn't know, is also Anthony Scaramucci's birthday. A good place to leave it. We'll see you next week, and we'll see you, our members, for our Q&A on Sunday. And otherwise, do join us again next week. We'll be back with more.
Thank you so much for joining us.